This is a love letter to Aline McKenna, a screenwriter, producer, and director who's responsible for some of the most hallowed pop culture classics of the century and some of the most inspiring female figures put to screen. McKenna's films are often called romantic comedies, but taking a closer look at her filmography, you can see how she spent her career challenging romantic comedy conventions and making the genre entirely her own. Her films are better understood as what she calls coming-of-age movies for adults, her favorite subjects being our endless search not for a romantic counterpart, but for a sense of self and purpose in life, and the profound personal growth we can experience at any age. There are depths to be explored in even her most unassuming films. In this video, I'll be covering the cult classic 27 Dresses. It was dismissed by critics as a chick flick upon its release in 2008, but criticisms of its reliance on familiar stereotypes actually distract from the complex character development at the heart of the film. There are many rom-com formulas that McKenna does indulge, but I'll be exploring the lessons she teaches us about life and adulthood through her fascinating female characters and her creative takes on familiar tropes, starting with the trope of the marriage-obsessed woman. In the 90s and 2000s, wedding season as a concept was constantly mined for content. Women were portrayed as hysterical, overly dramatic brides, unmarriageable wildcards, or insufferable workaholics. Marriage was a prize to be won, and young women participated in a vicious race against time and each other. On the surface, 27 Dresses is no different from other trope-filled rom-coms, given its protagonist's stereotypical obsession with weddings. But a closer look reveals how McKenna both indulges a stereotype and challenges it. Jane, played by Katherine Heigl, is a 27-time bridesmaid and an adamant believer that an amazing wedding is the ultimate realization of true love. But it's Jane's obsession with the fantasy of romance, the symbolism of marriage, that keeps her from truly living her own life and growing, personally and professionally.
This is the useless crap that the $70 billion a year wedding industry has convinced us all that we have to have or we won't be happy.
She's a chronic people pleaser, taking care of everyone but herself, running personal errands for her boss George, who she's hopelessly infatuated with, and serving as a minion to her immature bridezilla sister.
That's why I love you.
I love you too. Oh!
I can always count on you. You never say no, which I love.
Jane shows us how limiting and dangerous being a hopeless romantic and people pleaser can be, as she takes a passive role in her own life, waiting for epic romance to just drop into her lap.
You just think that one day George is going to wake up and realize that he is madly in love with you, and he's going to make some spectacular gesture of love.
But of course, real connection takes work and vulnerability and an openness to the unknown, which is actually antithetical to the way Jane lives her life at the moment, clinging to routine, planning her days to a T to make other people's happy endings come true. And that's where Kevin comes in. James Marsden plays a snarky journalist who decides that Jane's story is so outlandish that writing a humiliating profile on her bridesmaid track record in the local newspaper would be his ticket to covering more serious journalism. And as terrible as his initial intentions are, he tells Jane what she doesn't want to, but needs to hear.
I bet you want to say no.
But I can't. It's my sister.
But you can say no because it's your sister. And I think you love weddings so much because you'd rather focus on other people's Kodak moments than make memories of your own. I think you want a wedding. Not a marriage, a wedding.
Kevin exposing Jane in the paper actually lights a fire under her. She has an unhinged outburst and very publicly ruins her sister's engagement to George, revealing that she's actually not the perfect bridesmaid or sister or person that people expect her to be.
What you did was unleash 20 years of repressed feelings in one night. It was entertaining, don't get me wrong. But
In the aftermath, Jane recognizes the hollowness of her own romantic fantasies. So when she finally clears the 27 bridesmaid dresses from her closet, she demonstrates growth. She's awakened to what she truly wants, and it isn't George or the job she's been so complacent with since college. And then she does something with her newfound knowledge.
And I got so caught up in the job that I never bothered to get my own life. I think I got too comfortable to leave.
Here, McKenna reminds us of the power of self-determination and that the most important relationship in your life is the one you have with yourself. A lesson she reinforces over and over again across her films. Knowing yourself and recognizing the agency you have, no matter what stage you're at in your life, enables other crucial personal developments, like standing up to the people who've taken you for granted, advocating for yourself,
I quit.
and articulating your feelings to the person you love. At the time, McKenna was trying to rebel in her own way against the romantic comedy conventions she'd inherited. 27 Dresses is about love, but it's also a coming-of-age film. In an interview with The Ringer, she even revealed that she pushed hard for Jane to not end up with anybody at all. I often had a lot of issues in development where I wanted to have a non-traditional ending to a romantic comedy, she said. Like on 27 Dresses, I just did not want Jane to end up with anybody. I wanted her to end up becoming a more realized person. And so it was a years-long back and forth with the producer who was like, "You're insane." The final script definitely reflects the concessions she had to make. And for rom-com fans, they're nothing to complain about. In addition to the conventional happy ending, Brosh McKenna incorporates other classic formulaic aspects of romantic comedies that we really love. First, there's a clumsy pratfall that leads to a meet cute. We have the hopeless romantic and her cynical counterpart,
The angry marriage hater.
who's actually wounded and sensitive from his own past heartbreak, and they're enemies only to become lovers later. Then there's the melodramatic grand gesture that isn't necessary but feels like the best form of romantic closure in a film. Though this happy ending isn't the revolutionary one Brosh McKenna was initially hoping for, the happily ever after here indicates an undercurrent of optimism that we get from all of her films. She's critical about them, but tropes about romance exist for a reason. They reflect our hopes, ideals, and fantasies. And Jane's sentimental wedding to Kevin, though predictable, isn't a full circle moment. She's in a different place as her fully realized self in control of her own narrative. And Brosh McKenna reminds us here that it's the genuine connection between people that gives the pomp and circumstance and silly rituals of romance all their meaning. And I love that years after the film's release, Brosh McKenna is stirring the pot, calling attention to what we take for granted in these rom-coms. In an interview with Variety, she said, "I controversially am not sure that Jane and Kevin from 27 Dresses are still married. Just a thought. I mean, there was a lot of romantic idealization. I don't really feel like they got the chance to know each other. That was a big-ass wedding. I'm concerned." These are great points, but as a diehard rom-com fan who loves gratifying endings, I don't really want to hear this. But these remarks provide a little taste of how Brosh McKenna has a way of popping our little romantic, idealistic bubbles with a healthy dose of practicality and without cynicism. She gives us what we want, but with a few disclaimers thrown in. More on this in part 2 of this series, coming soon, where I'll discuss how Brosh McKenna dismantles tropes about working women in one of her most underrated films, Morning Glory.